Hello and welcome to our third episode. My name is Sarah.
And I'm Elina, and I'm so happy we're here again.
This is going to be a bit of a different and an interesting topic that we're going to discuss today, which is the role of spirituality, of that part of us which is intangible but still inhabits our body. We're going to give you our personal take on the matter, and this is going to be a discussion between us because we're also discovering each other's beliefs and practices around this special area of our life. However, it is undeniable that within a circle of areas that constitute our life, where we put our family, our friends, our jobs, our career, and our downtime, there is also a little slice that is there for our spiritual side, for our spiritual practices or beliefs. I'm going to kick off the conversation by saying that some of my clients tell me that they don't have a spiritual area of their life. And of course, that's absolutely legitimate. However, I always reply to them that also believing in nothing, in randomness, in just the fate or the Big Bang is also believing in something. And there is always, as humans, a tendency of having to find that something that is creating things. For example, scientists have spent so many hours trying to trace back to what was the origin of Earth. It's undeniable that deep inside of us there is a curiosity, a need to know, maybe to invent what we believe in. And so today we're going to dive a bit deeper into what are we creating with our minds when it comes to spirituality.
Yes, I think this is such a beautiful and rich topic that has a different meaning for everybody, which makes it fun, right? It's something that can add a lot of meaning to our lives, I feel like, especially when we're talking about mental health and taking care of ourselves, or when we're even talking about creating our best self or creating like our dream life, which is definitely why we're also here having these conversations. Is like, what are we really talking about here? Why do we maybe even want to go there? And what are we really searching for? Who even are we, right? And what are we doing here? What is the meaning of my life? How are we connecting with other people? How do I find this peace and this place where I feel like I belong, right? Where I feel connected, maybe to something bigger, which I think is such a beautiful driving force of like motivation and feeling really content and fulfilled in life. And I love that we're having this conversation, Sarah, because I think both of us have been on our own spiritual and like self-development paths. And we actually met on like a meditation retreat like years ago. And I'm wondering, what role does it play for you?
It's a bit of a safety net, I would say. So the image I have is like this free flying and sometimes free falling in life, where without this safety net, which is what is my purpose? What am I doing here? What are we all doing here on this planet? And I know it's something that I have created as a narrative for myself, and I don't have a way to verify it. I don't think anybody has. There are some near death experiences which get some people closer, but still it's their experience which I can choose to believe in or not. So going back to my safety net, there were some years in life where I felt very lost. And in order to dive deeper into my spirituality, I had to go through that. I think that if life was a smooth sailing the whole time, I wouldn't have even wondered, what are we all doing here? What is my purpose in life? So when I was going through a bit of a more hard time, I was looking for maybe a bit of extreme answers. I want to have a mission. I want to be seen as special under a spiritual eye because maybe I'm born to be a healer. So there definitely was a part of ego that got into and probably still gets into my way of relating with spirituality. But I've also had some experiences, thankfully, where I could quiet my mind and I can achieve this state, and everybody can, even if we like sit down or lie down on a yoga mat and we quiet a little bit down our mind, and then we can feel some waves of emotions that come from maybe nowhere, maybe our subconscious mind. Maybe we're just interconnected with other people and we can actually sense their emotions. And I strongly believe in this. And when I work with people, many times I'm able to empathize with them and sense their emotions, which I feel every human being is able to do. So when I was having these, let's say, less body like experiences, they were more intangible, more. I now realize that's when I was discovering my spirituality, my spiritual side, which for me, it's just recognizing that we're not just flesh and bones. We're, for example, an identity that we carry out through life. Although our body changes, it changes cells and bones and muscles. So we're constantly changing, but there is something that is staying, and some people believe something that is remaining here also after death.
Thank you for sharing. I really think that by knowing, or at least kind of leaning into the mystery, perhaps, of that there is more, like it changes your perspective on life, right? And on the things that are happening, and on kind of trusting as well in like a bigger picture, and knowing you have a part in it and not everything is just random. I think for me, that has been such a beautiful layer to my own growth. And I think for me, I really got into it by, well, my partner really, who I met like over 10 years ago, who was already on this like spiritual path and kind of got me by my hair and put me on the path. But really, the idea that things are in a way more in our control than I ever thought. Like, I think before that happened, I was really unaware of the influence I had on my own life. And I remember we were on this retreat on Hawaii. And there was this guy talking about how you're creating your own reality, and how if you're in a job you don't like and you're kind of just accepting that that's just life, then of course it's not going to change. And I think for me, that was like this first kind of awakening moment. I was like, oh, wait, yeah, that makes sense. I want to change things. I don't really like my job. And that was actually the moment that I decided to quit my job at I was a manager at a salad bar in Amsterdam. And it was fine. It was fun. I was making coffees. It was like a nice environment, lots of healthy people around me. But I wanted to start my own business. And I was like, okay, I guess this is, if I want to create what I want, I have to start somewhere. And that was actually the the moment this all kind of started, and what leads us here to this very moment, right? So I think there are so many layers to this, but I really loved the idea of having this like powerful influence, being this soul or this being who gets to choose what happens, and who gets to like learn about our emotions and learn about the mind and learn about what thoughts and beliefs are and why we're even doing certain things, and that there's so much more behind what we're doing than just kind of the things we see or think on a conscious level. And that was such a freeing idea to me, that I could all of a sudden see my people pleasing behavior and be like, oh, wait, this is coming from somewhere, and I can heal that part of myself that wants to feel safe in that way. And like that, those things are just so freeing to realize and to kind of understand better how to really create peace, but also create the things you really enjoy, that you really want, that are fulfilling. And Sarah, I would love for you to share a bit more, because in this world of self development, which I think is very tied to spirituality, even though I would say they're different concepts, especially in kind of this newer movements that we also see on social media. We see a lot on YouTube about all of these topics. There's a lot around manifestation and manifesting your life, looking at your beliefs, and really chasing your own goals. As you are in your work, constantly working with the subconscious, can you tell us more about what is really like happening there?
Gladly. So, our subconscious is responsible for 95% of our thoughts, our actions, our reactions. And if you think about your life, like just the job you do, the people you're with, the choices you make, these are all some actions that you take. Even when you decide not to act, still an action, that's still a decision that comes from your free will that you're using. So, if we work back from it, your actions make up your life. You have this job, you go to the job, you decide to stay in the job, because as we said, that's also a decision. One step back is your thoughts, because it's your thoughts that bring you to perform that action. A simple example is I'm thirsty, I'm going to go over to the kitchen, I'm going to get a glass of water, and I'm going to drink it. And if we do a step even before our thoughts, where do our thoughts come from? Well, many, 95% of our thoughts come from the subconscious mind, which is this, I like to imagine it as a black box where there's like probably randomness or infinite potential depending on what one believes. Some believe that it's the tissue that makes the universe. These are beautiful images, but in my head, it's a black box. And inside this black box, during life, we start absorbing programs that get sedimented in this black box of our subconscious mind and program the way we act and the way we behave. And one day we find ourselves being adults, and maybe we feel like we're doing a lot of things that we wouldn't want to be doing, but we still do them. Maybe we're sabotaging ourselves. Maybe we're eating the wrong foods. Maybe we're procrastinating. And when we wonder why and we want to change our life, we feel incredibly stuck, because remember the chain. Your life has been formed by all those actions and those behaviors that were driven by all those thoughts that were created by the programs you have in your subconscious mind. So that you're very disconnected with the beginning of this cycle, and you just stay in the pain of the end of the cycle. So in order to change your life, and how people say transform your life, manifest your dreams, sometimes I could argue they're a bit of an extreme, because I open YouTube and I'm like, and by now I should be making 20K a month, because I know this stuff, and I should be, I don't know, speaking in front of the King of England, and I should be doing all. That's a bit extreme, but if we take it in our own life, in our own realistic dimension, what we can do is, okay, we're stuck in this life situation, or maybe we're not stuck, but we want to change a couple of things. I'm going to go back to which programs are driving my behavior and my reality. For example, when I've started coaching, I had a great difficulty in asking people for money, because in my subconscious mind, there was the program of money is the root of all evil. If you make a lot of money, it means that you're an evil person. And my job was literally the opposite. It was helping people. So I was like stuck with this subconscious thing that was keeping me back. And I found myself asking people, oh, can I have a 50 euro for a 1 hour session where I'm going to transform your life? And I had to work a lot on my programming. And I think that any aspect of our reality is actually dictated by our subconscious mind. So in that sense, as you were saying, there's a lot we can do to change.
And how would we change these things? Because when I hear you speak, I'm like, okay, great. Yes, please. I would love to dive into that black box and change all these beliefs and patterns so I can just feel happy and fulfilled all the time and be healthy. Um, how do we go about that?
It's a great question. So now that we've seen the theory, we can also understand that our subconscious is a part of us, and it's a part that has a little door and that we can access actually when we choose to. At first, the door is going to be like very hard to open because we've never opened it. And there is a bit of a resistance to do new things. That is actually a rule of our mind. Whatever is new will create a bit of fear and resistance. So at first, it's going to be like we sit down maybe on our sofa or on our bed, we close our eyes and we try to listen to what we have inside. And there's 1,000 thoughts of, this is not going to work. What am I doing? This is so silly. Or we're going to do maybe affirmation. Now there's a big trend of waking up in the morning, looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, I'm awesome. I'm attractive. I'm gorgeous. I am creating unlimited abundance. And there might be a little part of you that says, and that is not true. And you look so silly. So at first, there's going to be a lot of resistance in changing your subconscious mind. And I recommend either getting some help to do that or using the method that you feel is the one you're actually resonating with, which just means that you feel is less fake. Because for me, like the mirror thing was impossible. I just felt super strange and awkward doing it. Whereas lying in bed with my eyes closed and listening to my breath and seeing what emotions are going on in me right now was much more accessible. Once you found an emotion, that's your door. That's your door to the subconscious mind, because the emotions come directly from the subconscious. So If you're doing it by yourself, it takes a little bit of exploring and hearing maybe stories of other people that have uncovered some beliefs, like the one I just shared with money. You could close your eyes and be like, is this something I believe? It is. Or no, it's not. I'm good with money. So it takes a little bit more of experimenting. If a client is doing it with me, I have a process to guide them in a state that is very open and relaxed. It's called a hypnotic state. It's like an alpha brainwave or even a theta brainwave, ideally the relaxation, where they can access and also talk with their bodies and their subconscious mind. There's like an intelligence, let's say, behind our bodies that is connected with our beliefs. And that's why sometimes doctors find that there is an unexplained pain somewhere in the body and they say, it's psychosomatic, like it's your brain causing that pain. This is a direct mm, manifestation of how you could use that pain as a door to go into seeing what program of mine is creating this pain. Does that make sense?
Yes. So if I would be doing the mirror exercise, which I think is such a famous one, right? And this is something that I talk with clients about, right? This like idea of, okay, if you are hating your body right now, how can we start changing the way we look at ourselves? And how can we stop shaming and like hating? And just a lot of my clients are like, yeah, but my body is ugly, right? Like it is a fact. So how would I be able to accept it or love it or be okay with it? And this is something I hear a lot when people are trying to be more positive, or even like if we stay with the body positivity, they want to learn to love their bodies, but they're like, yeah, but I just don't. So, and then you were saying like you could say these things to yourself, but in the back of your mind, there's this little voice that's like, well, it's still ugly. Is that your subconscious, or how does that work? Like, can you explain a bit more how that works and maybe what people can do if they feel like they're literally lying to themselves?
That is your subconscious. That's exactly it. And the resistance I was talking about is exactly that little voice that says, don't even give me that belief. I'm going to push it back as soon as I hear it. And that's why when other people, for example, compliment you, you're never going to believe them. If you have that internal belief that you're not beautiful, they can tell you, a man can tell you, you're the most gorgeous woman I've ever seen in my life. You're going to feel so angry with him, maybe because you think he's lying.
Yes.
So going back to how can we really listen to our subconscious mind and reprogram it without having to lie to it, we need to realize that our truth is very subjective. It's just our reality. When you said, my body's ugly, that's a fact. That's a fact for me. It can only be a fact for me because maybe somebody that has my same exact size and waist and weight might feel gorgeous. That's absolutely legitimate. And luckily, we have many examples of women that don't fit the standards of what a body should like. And they show up with so much confidence and self-love, and they really love their bodies. And you can see it that they're not pretending. So it is possible because that's their reality. And if I go into their subconscious, they're going to have a belief of I'm beautiful. Whereas if I go into a subconscious of another person that might have a thin and fit and perfect body, the belief might be I'm ugly. And there's no weight loss, there's no cosmetic treatment, there is no outfit that will change that belief. It might have an impact like on a higher up level of the mind, which is a conscious mind. That's why some people that really don't like themselves feel like they have to wear makeup every single day in order to go out into the world because they feel a little bit of less shame and relief. But we're talking about tiny percentages on a belief that is 95% present in you and that says, I'm ugly.
Wow, that is so interesting. And I think this is also where you can sometimes feel if people are talking about something, but it's only from like maybe this learned place of like there's this mental concept of like, oh no, I am accepting myself, but you can feel that they're not there. That would be the difference between basically the conscious and the subconscious mind.
Exactly. I love that. Do you find that with your clients? They have those moments where you can feel at a deeper level if that's really something they are saying or it's something they're believing?
Yeah, I think that's that there are layers to it. I think within the process of guiding them towards feeling more acceptance, there are often these, like, because of our conversations, these aha moments where I think it's kind of like trickling into the subconscious, maybe, so that maybe after 10 or 20 or sometimes one conversation, depending on how ready they are to hear certain information, it kind of clicks. And then there's like this real release, it's often emotional as well, but they feel this like full body release of like, oh my God, Elena, this is what you've been talking about. I never really believed you when you were like saying you could feel free, you could feel at peace, and you can be confident and love your body. There's often like this big gap between the people that, of course, come to me and how I'm explaining how you can feel, right? They're like, yeah, sure, it sounds great, but I don't think so. And then there is often this moment where they're starting to realize, oh, wait, this is actually a thing. I can change the way I'm feeling or thinking or perceiving myself. And that's just such a beautiful moment. And I love that we're actually gonna be working together, and really combine my more conscious approach with your subconscious approach, which I think might really kind of I wouldn't say speed up because we're not in a rush, but it might really assist and support the process. And I really think that this is such, for me, a big part of my spiritual journey has been kind of realizing that we are more than a body. I do hope and probably believe that we are these souls having a human experience, and that therefore all we're trying to do in so much of this um, self development and diving into ourselves and learning how to reprogram is all to get back to this more natural, like real you, that already exists, that is not programmed to be a perfectionist or a people pleaser or someone that does feel unsafe in relation to men, or even feel like that their body just sucks no matter what they do. Yeah.
I love that. And I remember that I wasn't open to believing, even in the subconscious mind, for a long time because I was like, why didn't they teach this to me at school? This should be in the books. And the science of it is in the books. Like you will see that you have a nervous system, which is something that you can absolutely control in a state of meditation. And then it allows you to access that deeper part of you, which is programmable and is really here at the back of your head. And it is actually your animalistic brain that keeps you alive, and that's its job. When you hear about fight and flight responses, that's what you will find in your science book. So I was able to get until there, but then everything that was more like, and you can reprogram this part, and you can access to it, and you can have access to it, and you can change what's in there, that really escaped me. And it felt magical until, as you say, you feel it, you live it through. And then you put together all the information you had, and even having that information speeds up the process because you're like, okay, yeah, yeah. And now everything makes sense, but it's something that you have to experience. And that's why sometimes people come to me and they're a bit skeptical. And I understand them because I was very skeptical about hypnotherapy when I first tried it. I was in my bed with my headphones on and I was like, what am I doing to myself? I have fallen so low to be trying this crazy method. And then slowly, like in a couple weeks, it clicked. So I always tell the more skeptical of my clients, it's something that you need to try to see what it is and what effect it has on you.
Yes, I think what you're also saying, like a little bit before already, is if people are curious about this, to first of all get curious, like what is really going on. I think that was such a big part of my journey as well, as like to get really quiet in order to hear yourself, like really. And you need space for that. You need to have the space to listen, to really listen to yourself and see what's happening inside and see where things are coming from. And then to be open to the possibility that things can change and that maybe the things you're thinking aren't actually real or like the only truth out there. I think it's a scary thing though, because it gives us some certainty, right? To be like, no, I really believe this, or this is my truth, even if it's hurting us. And I think it's scary to admit, like, okay, maybe some of these like core beliefs I have about myself or about life or about relationships, they might be a lot more subjective than we think, and that it's actually also okay to change that. And I wonder because a lot of these manifesting conversations are around how we're either available for something in life or not, or how we're basically kind of matching our outer world to our inner world. And I think this is such an interesting area of that because I do feel there's a truth in that. Even though there is like a big like shadow side, I feel like, to the whole manifestation conversation. As you were saying, you get all this like content in your face the whole day about like if you're not flying around in private jets and you have like all the success in all the areas of your life, then you're basically just not doing enough. You're not good enough. You're basically failing at manifesting your dream life, which I think has like a big impact on our mental health. And I do see that a lot these days with even there's really young people or clients that are like 24 and they're already like, why am I not crazy rich, successful, and super clear on everything I want and have the dream relationship? Like, I'm behind in life. Like, how do I get there? And I don't even know how I can accept that I haven't done everything yet to be there. So I do want to like highlight that that's really not the kind of conversation we want to have here because of course, that is a super unrealistic way of looking at your life and also not a very gentle, honest one of like, hey, where am I even at? What do I even want? And what is even possible for me in this moment? And maybe also trusting like a bigger play, in this universe as we are souls having this like human experience. But can you tell a bit more about that like matching of our inner world and our outer world?
Yeah. And I love that you bring it in a very practical and tangible way. And just before I answer that, I'm going to say that for some people, it's also asking themselves, have I caused also the negative things that are happening in my life? Because if I'm manifesting, I can also like manifest in the reverse sense and create all the horrible things that are happening. And I think that for sure your subconscious has a play in the negative things that are happening to you and in the blocks that you have, and that's a good thing because we have power on our subconscious mind, but we can't expect to undo centuries of programming because if you think about it, what I believe comes from my parents, what they believe come from their parents, so we're going up centuries of people that have had beliefs that then have been passed on to me, and I have really a lot of power on what I choose to believe, but we're not so um able in this present day because we can't spend 24 hours changing our beliefs and meditating. We have lives and we're able to enjoy them even if my subconscious isn't extremely clear and I'm not a Buddhist monk meditating on top of a mountain. That doesn't mean that I can't live a super happy life. And so bringing it going back to your question, how do we match our inner world with the outer world so that in more, let's say, woo-woo terms, I create what I desire. More than that, I think, in my opinion, is to be really open on a conscious and a subconscious level to see the opportunities that are around me and to jump on them. Because if I have a belief that I'm not deserving to be a therapist because I'm not good enough, or I'm not deserving to be a mom because I will seriously mess up my kids, my chances of either being a therapist or getting pregnant and being a mom are going to be lowered by what I hold in my subconscious mind. And that's obviously a shame because people think, I'm not doing it right. I should put more effort into it. But actually, it's just because you have a big fear that comes from your subconscious that you're not going to be good enough. And that definitely comes from your programming and probably comes from this quite silly. Sometimes it's like really tiny little silly scenes that happen during childhood that we bring with us. So many times I go back to scenes where my clients are in primary school and the teacher has just humiliated them in front of the whole class. And that moment they started to feel like they're losers, they're not clever enough, they're not good enough. And they bring that with them. We all bring it with us until we grow up and until we can make that click of saying, actually, it wasn't me not being good enough. It's that teacher that wasn't really ready to be a teacher because that's not the way you teach, for example.
Yes, that is a really great example of how very small things can create these beliefs that indeed aren't true, right? And we can be available to the success we want. And we will show up differently as well. I feel like that's been my experience in growing in this and letting go of certain beliefs and patterns is that the moment you let those go, you have different kinds of conversations with people around you, right? You show up differently. You have a different kind of energy. Maybe you feel a bit more confident, or you're not afraid to speak up anymore, which creates opportunity, right? It's the same way as that I used to be super shy. So, like, doing this whole podcast would be horrible. And I have a job where I need to speak, and it would not be great if I would be super shy and feel really blocked about speaking my truth or giving my perspective or giving my advice, right? So I think this is really more of a realistic way of looking at manifestation, is that you make yourself more available by kind of letting go of some of these blockages or these beliefs that are really just holding you back. But it's not about, oh, you have this idea about money not being available to you. So that's the only reason you're not a millionaire right now. It's like, that is not like how life works, right? And beautiful things take time. It takes time to create things. And I think that's actually a wonderful process to explore yourself and to explore life and to be excited about this changing that happens. And I do think what you were saying about being afraid of what you manifest is such a personal topic for me as well, because when I just started learning about all of this, and some teachers really saying, like, everything that happens is your own fault, and everything, like, every thought you have will create that thing. So if you are thinking any negative thoughts, which is actually pretty normal to have like negative thoughts, you become super scared. And this was really, I think, a couple of years ago, I started to get like really obsessive about not wanting to think any negative thoughts. And I remember being super, like, I think I had like a session with somebody and she had breast cancer. And I was like, oh my God, that's horrible. And I think I had some thoughts around it. And I was like, oh my God, no, you cannot think about cancer because now you'll start creating it, which, of course, in turn, all I could think about was not thinking about it, which was making me think about it until it was basically this pink elephant example, right? Of like, do not think about the pink elephant ever again. And it took me months to really get out of this like obsessive thinking about not thinking it, and it caused so much anxiety and fear to the point where I was really like, I'm gonna die soon because of all these negative thoughts I was having. And I think it's just, I'm sharing this because it's such a good example of how believing that the energy or the thoughts that you're thinking just instantly create stuff is like terrifying and not a great thing for our mental health at all. Yeah, what would you say about that, Sarah?
Thank you so much for sharing that example. I think it's a real testament to how open and courageous you are. I agree with what you say. I think that it's natural for us to have a very negative, very crazy thoughts. Like I had some clients that told me, but I'm like thinking about how I like 10 ways I could commit suicide. Does this mean I'm gonna commit suicide? No, let your mind explore. I remember as a child having this urge to think, what if I just open the door as the car is going? What would happen? The mind explores like a little monkey going in all directions. The moment we judge it or we try to resist, as you explained, that's the moment we get a bit stuck in the loop. And yet, it's also okay to be stuck in the loop. We will get out of it sooner or later. It might cause us a little bit of um of harm, but in the moment. But then through suffering and through harm, that's also how we grow, isn't it? So it's just this constant like snowball that's becoming bigger and bigger, and that's how we become richer and richer with experiences, both positive and negative.
Yeah, I think it's the harm that it does is more about the fear and anxiety it creates in your life than the actual things you're thinking about, right? When it comes to these kind of negative thoughts or intrusive thoughts, even that you were talking about with your client having these ideas about suicide. And I think there are um, a lot of people who fear that that somehow then is their bigger truth, you know? Like if they are in a theater and they're just like, there's this thought of like, just start screaming really loudly and like disturb the whole thing, that they're somehow afraid that that's what they really want to do, which often is like not the case at all. So it's this very confusing situation for a lot of people, like how to deal with negative thoughts. And I think, especially when you're in this phase, like how to not be afraid of negative thoughts impacting your life when it comes to like the reprogramming in your subconscious.
Yeah. So we have a lot of power and it's in our subconscious. We can access it and it's okay to have random thoughts. These have been the things that really stick with me about this conversation. It's so nice to be able to share our random thoughts, to say, yeah, actually every time I go have dinner, this is a real story. I go have dinner at my the mom of my boyfriend's place. I'm always scared that I will drop something. So all I can imagine is I'm going to the table with like the plate with the dinner that we've spent 2 hours cooking, and I just drop the whole thing in the middle of the living.
And the more you, of course, like focus on it and the more you are afraid, there's actually a chance you might drop it, right? So that is kind of, in a way, also a perfect example of how, in a sense, you can manifest these things, but it's not because you're like creating some sort of destiny for yourself, right? It's way more practical in that sense. It's way more in the moment of, if we learn how to relax more and be in the moment more, there is actually not much to worry about. And I also really wanted to touch upon how spirituality and self development have become so intertwined, but that there's this part of me that feels like they're actually opposites.
Oh,
Because when it comes to spirituality and really like being with ourselves and learning how to be in silence and really not fighting reality, but being in it and experiencing kind of the juiciness of being alive, which I feel like, especially if people die or like big things happen in life, there's often this period where people feel so much more alive and they're like, oh my God, like all of these things that I already have around me are so beautiful. And what a privilege to be alive. And how wonderful to feel the sun. And there's like so many small things that we can really enjoy. And like this idea of like life is happening right now already, instead of like chasing this idea of a healed or fixed version of yourself, which is something that comes into play when we're having these kind of conversations, right? I think there's such an easy tendency to be like, okay, let me go fix my subconscious now, and then I'll be able to relax, and then I'll be able to be peaceful. And it creates this same kind of striving and chasing again, but then just from this like self-help perspective. While I feel like this true spirituality is way more about already being in the moment and cherishing yourself and the moment, and really seeing how a lot of our suffering really comes from not accepting how things are, which in a sense you could say is also something you can practice. But I I think it's important to note that it's really healthy and helpful to embrace where we are right now, and that all of these things and the conversations we're having and the emotions we have and the patterns we want to resolve, that all of that is part of the life that is already happening, and that it's really normal and it will probably always be there. So there is not a point where you're just gonna be like, okay, ta-da, I'm fixed, and that God is like, welcome, Melina, this is your new life, free of patterns, thoughts, emotions, negative thoughts. You'll only feel peaceful and happy from now on. Welcome, which is something some people even feel about reaching their perfect body, or, letting go of something. They have this idea that they enter this like entirely new reality, which in a way we do, but it will still be full of duality, of conflict, of wanting to grow and change. And I think growth is such a beautiful thing that we can maybe enjoy a bit more, instead of feeling like we need to get to the end of it, but instead to end with a very cheesy quote, enjoy the journey. Yeah.
I love that quote. I think it sums up our conversation. And I like how you shared that you see them as opposite. I now understand why. I guess summing it up, if I'm perfect as I am in the moment, and that's my spiritual view on myself, because everything is right as it is right now, why should I go and change and fix things? So I totally understand your standpoint. And in my head, it plays out in a different way. So I'm going to share how I had seen it. For me, healing is spirituality, like they're the same thing in the sense that if I reconnect with who I am right now, this instant, I will see that there is no God with open arms. There is a bit of a mixture of emotions. And if I'm present, because I'm reconnecting with what's beyond my body and even beyond my subconscious, I can observe my subconscious and I can see this limiting belief. No, I don't need that. So for me, spirituality is like this is the physical plane, elevating one plane up. So it's like on a stairs, one step up, so I can see what's down there.
Yes, thank you. I think that brings it together, which is really what I'm experiencing as well. So thank you for sharing that, because it is so connected. And I think in a way it is the same. I think what I was just trying to say is that it's important to not make it a to-do thing. And I think by truly like getting into that space of connecting with what you could call maybe your higher self, or like this more spiritual realm, by being in deep meditation or doing things, I feel like for me as well, like the moment I am doing these kind of practices, or maybe after like a long meditation and I've done yoga, the more peaceful and connected I feel with the real me, the less of all of the other things that I was worried about even matter, because you have this higher perspective on things. And I would say you're kind of tuning into like a different radio frequency, right? Where the moment you elevate in that state, the rest kind of falls away, and there's so much clarity, and there is like this feeling that in a sense we are chasing, but by letting go of the chasing we'll actually get there sooner, which is such a paradox.
Wow. What you've just said. I'm speechless now. I don't know how to reply to that because that is it.
So, for our next episode, I was thinking maybe we can dive into this topic of holistic well-being, of holistic health a bit more, and talk about finding balance in what we were talking about in a previous episode about nutrition, about intuitive eating. Like, how do we find a way where we take care of ourselves and tune into all the beautiful ways we can support our bodies, support our mind, support our whole being, but also create like a relaxed, positive attitude towards it where we're not losing ourselves in this endless to do about fixing ourselves, and how we can really find fun and also be able to just eat pizza and really not care about it too much. I think that would be a beautiful conversation to have next.
I can't wait to have it. And thank you all so much for listening to this episode. See you very soon for episode 4.
Yes, and please share with us because this is such a cool topic that I feel like so many people have different views about. Like maybe you can share with us what you think, or maybe something that you've really picked out of this episode. Like, what are you thinking about? What are your ideas about spirituality and self-development, and really how to find like our personal or your personal balance in that?
Thank you very much.
Bye.